I'm Tonya McGrath, executive producer and host of the PowerPLAY Show. As we wind down our celebration of women for National Women's Month, the PowerPLAY will be airing all week wonderful stories of women as we conclude our series, Empowering Women. Be sure to join us each night this week, that's Monday through Friday of this week, as I introduce you to more amazing women who are excelling in their fields and making a significant contribution to all of our lives. That's Empowering Women on the PowerPLAY Show.
From the studios at Hull Bay Productions, this is the PowerPLAY.
Welcome to our special series, Empowering Women on the PowerPLAY Show. I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. I first met Lynn Scornavacca when I was a production assistant. I didn't know much about anything back then, but I marveled at her skills and the way she stood up to the boys in television. As I sit back and think about the women who impacted me in my professional career, there's no way I could leave Lynn out. Lynn began her professional career with Snow Sound in Hartford, Connecticut, where she began honing her skills as an audio engineer. At the time, she didn't know this would be her forever career, but she took a leap of faith and left her, quote, day job and pursued her production career. Lynn then moved to Boston in the early 80s, where she began working in sports broadcasting. In 1981, there were no other women mixing audio. She was the first A1, that's Audio One, that's the lead audio person, working in sports in the Northeast. Fast forward to where I met Lynn at WGBH-TV. There she shifted her focus to field audio, working with two wonderful people who also impacted my life, and that's Gleason and Howard Powell. From Say Brother to Antiques Roadshow to Evening at Pops and so much more, Lynn stood out as a true professional and skilled audio engineer. Finally, in 2004, Lynn took her another bold step and launched her own production company, Silver Lake Productions Incorporated, where she and her staff specialize in stories for nonprofits. I am so thrilled I get to spend this time speaking with a woman I just always look up to, and I can still call for advice to this day. Lynn Scornavacca, welcome to the PowerPLAY.
I'm honored to be here. You humble me with your kind words.
Well, you know, as I mentioned, I was a kid, and not so much in age, but I was a kid just mentally. And, you know, I have the huge role model of my mom, who I'm actually interviewing tomorrow for my podcast. But, you know, just seeing how you women just kind of took me under your wing and kept me in line and gave me a little talking to when I was a little bit too big for my britches. When we can talk about all of that, but you were definitely one of those women for me. And, you know, and to say that, you know, after all these years, I can still call you and say, hey, you know anything about this audio board, or, you know, how things going and that kind of stuff. It means a lot to me. But before we get into all of that in you and who you are, talk about this last year. How's it been with COVID and your work and everything? How have you been kind of just coping with everything this past year?
COVID has been a challenge, but I've been blessed. A lot of my work did go away. I work in galas. I work in fundraising videos for people who, my mission statement is stories from the heart. I want to make videos that help people. But two of my clients, A Better City, who do the Norman B. Leventhal Awards for Excellence in City Building, and the New England Center and Home for Veterans, both decided to keep their events and only make them virtual. And the New England Center and Home for Veterans, I honestly can say for one of the first times in 40 years in my career, their advancement team is all women. And it was amazing, powerful women saying, we can do this, we can redefine what we do, and we're going to do it like nobody else did. And we did. It was very successful. It was great storytelling. It was a lot of work. It was months and months of months. And how do we make this special? And the really cool thing that we did, we interviewed General Bumper, call name Switzer, and he was a pilot with the Blue Angels. And we took a lot of Blue Angel footage. and put it in. And Andy McCauley is a Navy pilot. He's the CEO there. And the two of them and the energy and the veterans that we honor who have succeeded from the center, it was great storytelling. We brought it all online and we were still able to create the mission. And Charlene Pontbriand, who to this day is someone I look to for advice in how to handle myself in a business world, is just a remarkable woman. Like your mother, Cynthia. I learned a lot from Cynthia. When I first came on the line and at GBH, there was a lot of stuff I didn't know how to handle or what to do. And your mother was always calm and nurturing. And there are words of hers I use to this day when I work with a crew. It's like, how would Cynthia handle this? How would Aida Marino handle this? Those are two women that taught me how to be good for the people that work for me.
I met you, and I think I started in production around 93, 94, and you were already a rock star. I remember it was you, it was Kathy Gleason, it was Judy Washington. I'm just trying to think of some of the tech people who were there when I started. And so, but there were a lot of guys. There were a lot of guys around. You know, it was majority men. And we know what the culture could be back then. But how was it for you in the early, you know, when you first came to Boston, early 80s, and then up to when we first met? How was it being the only one, the only woman?
I have to go back earlier. In like 1977, 78, I was working for a band, a bar band called the 10 Years Late Jug Band. And we opened up for Maria Muldaur on Bushnell Park in Hartford, Connecticut. Huge show, huge sound system. I'm scared witless because I'm mixing the opening act. And the crew was great, and I mixed, and there was this guy standing behind me the whole time with this big grin and kind of with this "you go girl" attitude, although you didn't say that back then. And at the end of the night, he offered me a job. It was Brad Snow, and he owned the sound company that I was mixing this huge opening act for.
Wow.
And Brad didn't treat me like a girl or a woman, or I became part of his crew. And as long as I worked hard and brought my A game, I got the jobs. And I got great jobs and great opportunity, like the Hartford Jazz Society with the late Jackie McLean, who always was like empowering strong young women and would use me humping gear around as an example for young girls. This is what you can do, and let's talk about strength. And this is while I'm dragging gear around, changing acts and sets. I worked for Connecticut Public Television as an audio supervisor. I got hired as an audio supervisor. I had actually bounced out of a very short, kind of unhappy career with the Hartford Stage Company. I realized theater wasn't for me, and was at Connecticut Public Television, and there was Kat Teray and Libba Oliver and Patty McQueen and Susan Conover and all these great women who were doing this for a living. And then came to TV 38 in Boston. Again, I had a full-time job. I wasn't coming on a summer relief. I wasn't going to play that game. I didn't want to take those chances because that wasn't going to get me a mortgage and a house and a foundation. So they hired me full-time, and there were guys that were pretty upset. And it wasn't pleasant. The Bull crew at the Boston Garden would cut my audio cables. It kind of got to a point where the head engineer on the remote truck that I was working on bought me a propane-powered soldering iron so that I could run out there without needing anything and put the cables back on. And my life for about a year or so. And then now they love me. I can walk in there and their sons know who I am. But it was, how much can she take? I had a young man come to me and go, well, why did they hire you? They should have hired me. I'm already here. And I said, do you do audio? And he said, no. And I said, so have you ever done any audio for sports? He goes, no, but they should have hired me.
Wow.
That was, and I was always told, because they poke. I should, the engineer, my boss pulled me aside. And I'm not saying I don't have a bit of a temper, but he told me to lose the chip on my shoulder and maybe people would like me better. And it's like the day they start treating me nice, I'll lose the chip on my shoulder. So even coming in along my career, I always had to kind of knock the rough edges off, because it's like, and you don't want to be that way. You don't want to be that girl, but in the beginning you have to be, or I had to be, because that's all I knew.
And this business is tough. I mean, you know, things have to happen very quickly and have to be correct. And there's a lot of, you know, yelling and moving parts that, you know, have to come into play in order for productions to come together. And, you know, how did you handle some of those more stressful periods? You know, was it ever a feeling like, oh, okay, well, you know, she doesn't know what she's doing, or something's not working and it, you know, it's Lynn's fault or whatever? How did you handle some of those maybe tougher issues?
I'd cry. I had a friend, Clay DeBrew, who was a playback guy, and he was always there to listen, to talk. He was a single guy, a lot older than me, actually. Sorry, Clay. I cooked. So he'd come over and eat my food and listen to me complain and teach me how to be a better person. Well, there weren't women to mentor me, because there were no women really doing what I was doing. You know, if I wanted to be in the production side of it then, but I didn't. I liked the boots on the ground. I liked the troubleshooting. It wasn't until the Barcelona Olympics in 1992 when I actually met women who do what I do. You know, we were hired by NBC. We actually all scooped up when the Christian Science Monitor went bankrupt. And Dave Mazza kind of took the crew that he wanted, and we built the triple cast in Barcelona, which was the first kind of steps of on-demand viewing for Olympics. And I met other women who were passionate about building things and being nerdy. And, you know, you worked 18-hour days, and it was hard, but it was fun. And then it was like a bunch of puppies, you know, it's like girls I can talk to. And that meant a lot.
You know, I know there weren't a lot there, but who are some of your role models in your life, female role models in your life that were, that you could go to? And, you know, you mentioned my mom, you mentioned Aida, and, you know, were there, did you have that support system for you?
Not really until I came to GBH. To WGBH. Judy Stoya always told me what I needed to learn about my own personal growth and where I needed to go. There was a point I don't remember, but the union basically broke up two-person crews. And Judy pulled me in her office and said, you have a choice. You can produce or you can shoot, and I'll keep you on my crew. One, you've got to lose your temper, because I do have a flashpoint, or I did then. And two, just work hard. What do you want to do? And I'll send you to school. Go do your homework. And I went to the main workshops and came back a shooter and loved it. And Kathy Gleason was answering questions. Howard Powell was answering questions. I wish I could think of the name of the chief engineer that worked there then that booted me out into the field. He did me the biggest favor in my life there, because I just wasn't built, again, for the studio there. I was much happier in the field.
Did you feel the pressure of having to work longer and harder and study more just to kind of keep up with your male colleagues at that time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My mom used to say you have to work twice as hard to prove you're half as good. And I do believe that. I don't want to be a martyr about it, though, because I love what I do. I always have loved what I do. And I love the challenges, and I love that it's different every day, and you meet incredible people. And it just, yeah, you do have to work hard, but there's no shame in it, in knowing your craft. I did a presentation at Massasoit Community College, and I think I scared some of the younger students, because it's like, you have to bring your A game. Yeah. My husband, Jeff, I did an interview with him for that when he worked with Pink Floyd, and how he got picked up on the crew because he was the guy who stayed and made sure things worked by the next day. And then they told him they weren't sending him home because he was that valuable. You have to be that valuable person, so valuable that no one sees that you're a woman. They just see that you're the person who's going to get it done. And I'll tell that to people now. Yeah. You know, bring your heart and soul. My heart always went out to young women. It's hard I never had children. It's hard balancing work and family too in this business because it's not a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
And actually, you and I had that talk once. I said, how do you do it? And you said, my work makes me a better mother. And I believe that because you're the type of person who can juggle 15 things at one time. Women are multitaskers. We had this talk in another group that I'm with. And you know, Kathy Gleason, when I was her audio person, she was pregnant with her second child. Carrying a 35-pound Beta camera on your shoulder and being 7 months pregnant, my goodness. And she did it. She did it up until like 8 months, I think. It's huge. I don't know how people do that.
Yeah. And I think it did make me a better mother. And I remember feeling that way because when you're balancing and juggling multiple things at a time, and then you go home to these two young people who are going in two different directions and they're 5 years apart and one's up, one's down and whatever. I was like, oh, okay, this is just basically work at home. You know, I can
And
do
your
it.
mom did the same thing with you and your
My
sister.
mom did the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. And it took a village, you know, I wasn't by myself. My mom wasn't by herself. And it did take a village, but it did make me able to kind of manage things at home. I want to talk a little bit because you gave me this story about when you and our beloved Howard Powell, shout out to you, Mister, were kind of the last two hires, staff hires, and you defined it as being the quota hires. Howard Powell is African American, and you, of course, are a woman, and he said something to you. He gave you some good advice. Talk about that.
Howard and I started partnering after Kathy left on maternity leave. They partnered me with Howard, which was great. We were partners for years. We went all over the world together. But when I was doing the interview for the engineering staff, a female supervisor came out and said, you have to do everything wrong. You're going to get this job because we need more women. And it was like, well, it's not really the way I want to get the job, but okay. And I went away after that interview and they called me a couple of days later and offered me the job. And probably a year later, Howard and I were sitting in the news van. And I said, so you and I were the last two hires in that round. How does it feel that we're tokens? And he went, no. He goes, they may have hired us because they needed a black man and they needed a white woman, but we're going to surprise them because we're going to be the best that we can possibly be every day, and we're going to work hard. And he's right, and we did, and we were a great team. So whatever you want to say about, okay, that's why you got hired. No, we got hired because we're a good investment and we brought our A game all the time.
And you met your husband, Jeff, working.
I got fixed up, actually. I was working, I have been Steve Colby's audio assistant for 40 years, on and off on different projects. And he got me in the door at Symphony Hall as an A2, a deck A2. And he hired this guy who came in off a tour. I can't remember what tour he was on. It might've been George Benson, and came in to also work. And we were doing our first show together was Bonnie Raitt and John Raitt, who's her father, singing at Symphony Hall. And John Raitt, for those of you, everybody knows Bonnie Raitt. John Raitt is the guy who sings Oklahoma and Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. And he was a very famous Broadway singer. And it was an amazing show. And that's where I met my future husband. And we've been together 28 years.
So it stuck. You know, I always found it very complicated to have relationships with people in the same business. I tried it once. It did not work. Because I felt that there was always this kind of unwritten idea of competition, and I'm smarter than you, but you know, you're doing this, but I know better. Did you ever have that with Jeff?
Not really. He and I worked a lot of the 4th of July's for Channel 4 and Channel 5, the 4 days on the Esplanade, and he was the monitor guy and I was the deck A2. And it was a great partnership. I mean, we fight, of course we fight, or we may disagree on something. Really funny, very quick story. We bought a surround system at our house and it wasn't working and I was getting frustrated. And one of the 5 speakers was the wrong color. And I said, go get the other speaker. And he went, oh, sure, Roadie Boy is getting sent away, Roadie Boy. And I'm trying to get this thing to work and it's not working. And sure, a half hour later, here he comes with the other speaker. And I'm like, so he comes in and he goes, okay, my turn. So I go take the dogs for a walk because it's heated between us at this point. And sure enough, I get around the block and I can hear the Allman Brothers coming out of that surround system, like from 5 houses down. And I'm like, I am never going to hear the end of this ever. And I don't. He still brings it up. But he'll say, yeah, sure, Roadie Boy fix.
One of the, I was working for Say Brother when you had the opportunity to go to South Africa to do a story about a man. He was going back to be reunited with his family after many, many years, a couple of decades, I believe. And this was right after apartheid had been abolished. And you were a white woman with 3 Black men going into South Africa. And we talked about it a little bit back then, but what was that experience like?
The man was Johannes Manong, and he had to flee first South Africa and then London and came to the United States. It's a long story. Remarkable man. What Johannes said to me is my presence as a white woman during any of these interviews changes the interview because of my presence. And I would put the mics on and I would fade into the background as much as I could and do the best I can. But Lindsay had a lot of faith in me, and I don't think I let him down. I think we had a great time. I think we worked hard. The things that I saw and the people I met, I mean, Black women for the first time in Parliament in Nelson Mandela's 100th day in office, beautiful Black women in fine kente cloth having a say. And those women that I met there are still just amazing to me. There was one, we were in the Kalahari Desert, and down, they were shooting B-roll. And Calvin had this idea that he was going to get this National Geographic moment with all the Maasai dancing. And it was one guy in a headdress in army issue boxer shorts and a rabbit skin other part covering him, dancing around. And I'm squatting on the ground and his wife is squatting on the ground. And she did the international sign between women that my husband's an idiot. She looked at me and went,
I love it.
I love it. I feel like she's my sister to this day, you know? It was one of those wonderful, but there was one time, just real quick, and it still bothers me. We were in the, I don't know, we might've been in Joburg, and I was going up in the elevator, and the elevator door opened, and there was a Black man in there, and the elevator was going down. And I went, oh no, no, meaning I'm going up. And as the elevator doors closed, he was yelling, I am a man, I am a man, I am not gonna hurt you. And I realized I should have followed him into the lobby and said, I was going up. I wasn't making a political statement. I was getting in the wrong elevator. That's all it was. And it still hurts my soul that there's somebody who thinks that I would think that way.
Yeah. Oh.
Right? It's, how many years has it been? In 94 we went? I still think that.
Wow.
But Africa is, I've gone again. I went to Tanzania. It's just such a beautiful country. And the people are so kind. I just hope that someday they can rise.
And you really traveled all over the world. I mean, you've pretty much been everywhere. And with people, whether it's from GBH, whether it was with the Olympics or some of the other work that you did. And, so you get an opportunity to see women in these different countries and how they are treated and how they are, whether they're marginalized, whether they're put on pedestals or what have you. That must give you a nice, good sense of who you are as a woman, I imagine, being able to see women in all these different spaces?
I was in Nepal before the world shut down. So for the month of November in 2019. And I made friends. I still talk to these women on Facebook or through Facebook chat. I don't know how to say it. What your world is and how little you have or how much you have, the simple joys of just being is what I learned there. It doesn't mean, and I'm lucky, I have a house, I'm warm, I'm fed, I have a place to go to when quarantine happened. But there was this old woman in the mountains, and we went to different huts as we trekked. And she sat at this stove, but it was wood, and she would cook and adjust the heat by pushing logs in and making the flame bigger, or pulling logs out and making the flame smaller. And she had her cats and her dogs, and she lived on this mountain by herself. And she got what the trekkers brought her, and the Sherpas brought her. And she's happy, and you could look in her eyes. You can always tell by somebody's eyes how content they are. And she was content.
You then started your own company in 2004 with your husband, I should say, Silver Lake Productions. Talk about what you're doing with your production company.
Okay. One of the things that you and I talked about in the pre-interview and is what makes you decide to make the move. And we've talked about grumpy old guys that we work with sometimes.
Just a couple.
But I always realized that if I started sounding like those grumpy old guys, it was time to look to do something else. And more and more and more, I thought, I can do this. Les Sampu, songwriter, who I adore, wrote a song that says you can't steal second with your foot on first. Baseball people. And
I love that.
I was sliding towards second, and I decided it was time to start Silver Lake Productions. And what I wanted to do were stories that helped mankind. Make money for veterans, make money for BAMSI was Brockton Area Multi-Services Incorporated, was one of my clients for 15 years. And I did fundraising for supported residences and, early intervention. And these are stories that come from my heart. I don't want to sound Pollyanna about it, but when a video plays and somebody wipes a tear and says, I get that, they're going to write a check and they're going to help the people who need it. And when that happens, I've done my job, and I'm very proud about doing that job. And the joy of it has been I've brought other kids along the way. I have 2 edit bays in my studio, and I'll hire somebody out of college or out of, I worked years for Bob Ballard when he was starting the Interspace Center. So when his kids have aged out, they come work for me for a year. And then I push them out in the world and they go and do great things. And there are a couple of guys and girls who have gone out and done amazing things. And that makes me feel good because I feel like maybe they learned a little bit here too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have one of my editors over there now. Hi, Alex. He's over there working now. But it is important. It is important because we all learned from someone. Someone did that for us in some kind of way. And I do think that's important. What do you tell what would you tell young women right now about the industry, about this business, which it just absolutely changed since 1993 when I started in production? What would you tell women now?
I'd say work hard and bring your best game. And you have to prioritize. And this is hard. Now, as I say, I never had children, so I could focus and I could work the weird hours and I could not have the personal life because there wasn't a little person waiting at home for me. I don't know how young women will do that now. Do you take the break? Do you just, juggling daycare is a nightmare. You're 2 minutes late, that's another $100.
Yeah.
But it's basically work hard and bring your best game. And hopefully it's different now where there's a network of women that you can go to, that can help you, that can understand, where that was kind of, you were in a minority back then with you and I were coming up. So it's women helping women. And also realizing that guys aren't the enemy, but if you're getting disrespected, it may not be you. It may be a power play. It may be just they don't know who to lash out at and you're easy and, to lash out at, and just be the best you can and be that person that they want to go to, the producer or the director or whoever. No one else is going to get this done but you. So I want you, and you need to be that person. That's not too scary because it's easy. If you love what you do,
right,
you're going to bring your A game.
Right. I have two stories that I want us to talk about. The first was I was just really early on in my production career. My mom was like the big wig, the big producer, and here comes her daughter thinking that she knows all this stuff, and I'm in the studio and I just kept getting in people's way. And they were these two, it turned out to be just such wonderful, wonderful friends to mine. But there were these two guys, and I would get in one person's way, and then he would like yell at me and tell me to move, and then I would get in the other person's way. And then finally, he said to me, he goes, "You out, like get out of the studio, you out." And I left like a dog with my tail between my legs. And I remember walking over to where the green rooms were, over outside of the studio, and just crying. And you came after me. And I don't know if you remember this, but you said, "You got to be tougher, kiddo. You got to be tougher." And I felt like, okay, one, she's got my back, and two, she knows that they suck. But, that just meant a lot to me back then, because, it wasn't a message about you need to be more like them. You were just talking to me, because what they were saying to me and the direction they were giving to me wasn't wrong. The communication could have been better, but it was about me. And I just remember that. And that always stuck with me, because I say that now, you got to be tougher than that.
Well, my heart broke with that, because, it's like, why are you being a jerk? My go-to defense now, when I find myself in that situation, and I still do sometimes, is like, wait, what can I be doing here and not be getting in the way and making forward progress? And that's being tough. And that's what I think I was trying to tell you, is you have to push it back on them. All right, you're being a jerk, but I need to be here and I need to get my job done. So
right.
How do I do that?
Yeah.
And it's, as I say, I never looked at you as somebody who was under me. We were always peers. And that's how I felt about that, because you and I had fun, and you and I did a lot of stuff together that two women wouldn't have normally done. And that was fun.
It was fun.
Right?
It was fun. The best moment, and I was there for 25 years. I had a lot of great moments, but and there was that one show that we were doing, and I had an all-female crew. And shout out to Laura Goodman, because she made this happen to me, because I was just like, why can't I just have an all-female crew? These guys get on my nerves every single day. And I believe you were audio. Kate Conklin was in tape.
Yep.
Marlia Regan was the line director and prompter. Kathy McSweeney. No, Kathy wasn't there yet. Jennifer Reardon was the TD. Kathy Gleason, that's what I meant to say, was on camera. And we had the best time. And I don't know if that's ever been done again, but I remember going to Laura and saying, you know what? We got to do this. Let's just do it. Let's just see what it's like. And it was great. And my pride was that you all had your own skill set. Everyone had their own skill set, but we came together as a team. And not to take away from my work with the boys, because they were fine, but it was just, that was like one thing I wanted to get done at GBH, and I'm just so glad. that I was able to do it then.
Well, Aida Moreno says it best. You are the person running with sand in your hand. And your crew, our job is to pick up that sand and make sure your hand is never empty. And we just run with you. And we all ran with you. And it was fun and it was great. And, you know, do you want to say girl power? Yeah, maybe. Dating myself, but girl power.
We end the show, the Power Play ends the show with asking our guests 3 questions. And my first question to you is, you're a pretty tough woman, and you're great. And I love that about you. Who did you get that from?
Oh, my mother and my grandmother, Geronda. I come from a matriarchal family like you. And my mom was the supervisor in the camera department at Grandway and Grand Distributors. I think she went back to work when I was 2. My grandfather raised me then because he was retired. And the stories she would come home with, and then she ended up the assistant district manager for the area. And the lessons she had, and unlike us, she did it all in the 2-inch heels, the 3-inch heels, because that's what women wore back then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, go back to the era of Mad Men, and that's what my mother was succeeding in. And she was a tough cookie and good at what she did. So I guess I learned it from her.
Was there ever a time in your career that you just said, you know what, enough of this crap? These people, these men, women, whatever it was, get on. I'm done. And if so, what made you kind of push through that?
When I first came back from camera school, I was 35 years old, and I had a 35-pound beta camera on my shoulder. And a lot of the producers were going, that's not Howard. I'm not going to work with her because she's not experienced enough on camera. I could do lighting, I could do audio in my sleep. And I would come home at night, my shoulder would be killing me. And I'd cry and sip a Chardonnay this way. and say, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then a show called Greater Boston started. And I met the host, Emily Rooney. And I was feeling kind of like a lost puppy. And Judy introduced me, and I kind of told Emily what was going on. And Emily said, I'll take you. You'll be my shooter. And I was one of 2, of course, but Emily gave me that break. And I realized life was good and I could run with this. I was still going to learn, and there were ugly days, and there were days she probably regretted her decision, but we ran with it. And I learned a lot. I mean, that was really the last show I worked for, that and Antiques Roadshow, before I left. One thing real quick, can I talk about Evening at Pops just for a minute? Susie Dangle ran that like amazingly. And that's where I worked with Steve Colby. And in a lot of those, I started stage managing up until a month ago. I did a show with Keith. And I have to say, he had to take the cue from me. So I'm watching a monitor, and I went like that. And he started the orchestra. And I just said, I dropped the hammer. And 75 musicians started playing music.
Wow.
And if there's anything that's worth the last 40, 45 years of what I was doing, my heart sang that moment. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Oh, I just got goosebumps. That's awesome.
I'm the luckiest girl in the world.
Finish this sentence. I am an empowering woman because...
Ooh, good question. I am an empowering woman because I believe in the strength of good work, and I believe in the strength of a good heart. And if you show me your soul, and you show me you're honest and kind and hardworking, and I'm not going to use a bad word, I will give you everything. There is no glass ceiling. And even if I'm pushing you beyond me like roller derby, take that job, go be great, then my day has been good.
Lynn Scornavacca, if you even knew how much you have helped mold this gal in my life, I thank you so much. I thank you for this time. And, you know, I really wanted an opportunity to say to you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very proud of you.
Oh, don't make me cry. Don't make me cry on my show.
Love to Cynthia too.
remember, we're airing all week long at 7 p.m., and you can listen to past episodes of the Power Play wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and now Pandora Podcasts. You can also watch our interviews on YouTube. Simply search Hull Bay Productions Media Channel and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tune into the Power Play Show each night this week at 7 p.m. as I introduce a new empowering woman. Again, listen to the Power Play Show wherever you subscribe to podcasts or on our YouTube channel at Hull Bay Productions Media Channel, on BroncoEyeRadio.com each day this week at 5 p.m. or simply visit thepowerplayshow.com. As I'm doing in this series, I would like to highlight the women in my professional career, technical experts in their own crafts, who have inspired me, in addition to the woman you met today, Lynn Scornavacca. Those women are Kate Conklin, Eileen Fisher, Kathy Gleason, Alexandria de Gonzalez, Laura Goodman, Liz Miller, Jane Pecor, Marlia Regan, Jennifer Reardon, and Kathy McSweeney. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you all for empowering me. Until next time, I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. Put on a mask, stay safe, and protect each other.